Because the public from Adventure Corner voted for Broken Sword 5 to be the game of the year.
What a privilege! I did know that, but how kind of you. Thank you. Sorry, I did know, of course, that we'd won, and it was a huge privilege because there were a lot of very good adventures, and to be voted by your readers is fantastic. I mean, it's a huge privilege, and thank you very much to all of you. Thank you for supporting Revolution and for supporting Baphomets Fluch. There's several ways of gauging feedback. The first one is to look on, say, Steam and to see what the reviews are. And the reviews were very good. So, I don't know, 90% or so. On iOS, again, we're looking at 4.8, 4.7, 4.8, so 90%, and same with Google. So for adventure fans, we're getting consistently 90% plus from people who've actually bought the game, which is obviously lovely. The other feedback we get is from our Kickstarter backers. And, I mean, can I talk just a little bit about how amazing that was? We obviously kickstarted it, well, not obviously, we kickstarted the game in August 2012, so 3 years ago. And I would love to say that I deliberately made it just after Gamescom, because it gave me the opportunity to speak to wonderful press who were really excited with an embargo. In other words, they would not publish anything until the campaign started. Now, that was a stroke of marketing genius. Except that the only reason it did happen was that we were 3 months late with the video, because I'd actually intended to release it in May or June. And then it kept slipping and kept slipping. And so by enormous good fortune, and the interesting thing is, I thought about this quite a lot. You know, when I wrote my first game in 1981 for the ZX81, I had the privilege of meeting our fans. And I remember still the first time I was asked to sign a box, and it was just amazing. I felt like a rock star. It was great. I was 18, I think, or 17 or whatever. And then as time went on and publishers became more powerful and retailers, we lost direct contact with our audience. And so we were never confident as to what actually people would want, because the decisions were being made by publishers. And the publishers were deciding, they were commissioning games that in 18 months' time, they had confidence that a retailer would have confidence to stock, because they would have confidence that their audience would buy it. In other words, there was all this sort of sense that you wanted to avoid risk. There was a risk adversity, and that's one of the reasons why adventures declined so rapidly, because of this risk adversity. When Apple released iPhone and we were able to self-publish, that was the first time that we were actually able to start engaging with our audience again. And it was extraordinary. It kind of felt like the early 80s when we'd done this back in the day. And so, as you probably know, we on the Kickstarter, we have 15,000 backers. So we have this extraordinary opportunity to communicate directly with, 15,000 people, which is an amazing thing to be able to do. And 10 years ago, if you could have said, we'll have this way of actually sending emails on a regular basis, it would have been so valuable. Now the whole thing's flipped. Not only can we communicate with people, but they help fund our game. It's extraordinary. So the feedback from the community was great. When we launched in 2012, I rather naively said that one of the goals, stretch goals, would be additional locations. But then I also said the game was going to be completed in April the next year. Now, the two are totally incompatible, because putting new locations meant a substantial redesign. And so we had this amazing goodwill. And I was really worried come April 2013 that was going to be shattered by sending out an update saying, look guys, I'm really sorry, but actually the game's going to be the end of the year. So I really crafted the update, sent it out, waited for this torrent of abuse to come back. And a lot of comments did come back. Half of them said, well, we never believed you in the first place, so that's great. And the other half said, well, we've been waiting 5 years. What does another 6 months make? And it became clear fairly rapidly that actually our community really saw it as their project, which it was, of course. And that we were in a partnership. And so, in a way, our bad news was their bad news, provided they felt part of it. The moment we stopped communicating with people, then bad news became bad news. But otherwise, it was part of the experience. People wanted to know why it had slipped, and we told them. And it was because of the redesign. It was because of the naivety of turning around and saying we're going to add new locations. But then, as we reached the end of 2013, it became clear that actually we were not going to be able to finish the game by the end of that year. And that really worried me because Niall Stevenson had just cancelled Clank. And Clank was, and he'd done it in a very, very inelegant way. And to call it inelegant, I think, is to be giving him a great, to be very generous in terms of the way he did it. I don't know if you remember, but he blamed the market, he blamed the amount of money he had, he blamed everybody apart from himself. So there was absolutely no humility at all. And at the same time, of course, Tim Schafer had gone on record to say they couldn't afford to finish part 2. And so really to go on the back of that and for me to say, guys, I'm really sorry, but actually the game's not going to be complete this year, I just couldn't do that. So that was the reason why very late in the day we decided to split the game. So we shipped the first half in 2013, at the end of 2013. And thankfully for us, luckily for us, the game was very well received. Our backers felt that it is what we had promised, and we'd been true to our word, and everything that we'd promised to deliver, we had delivered. We'd always attempted to over-deliver. So, apart from a few hiccups, we maintained a very good relationship with our community, which I hope we carry forward for future projects as well. Absolutely a no-go. I remember going to a talk given by somebody who'd raised $250,000, and he said, well, of course you couldn't possibly write a game for $250,000. And I was really shocked, because if you go into a campaign knowing that actually you're not going to have the funds, we knew that the funds that $400,000, we knew would not fund the game. But in the past, we borrowed from the bank, and when we do borrow from the bank, and we borrow from the bank again for Broken Sword 5, and they say, give us your house as security, and you say, okay. And that's what you need to be prepared to do. And if you're not, and one of the problems, of course, that Tim Schafer had was he talked about this, that needing more money, but there wasn't this sense, of course we'll pay it because it's our duty to. It was like, well, we need to get it, and perhaps we can get some from you, and so as a developer, it's our responsibility. Now, if you go in and something goes wrong and you go over, then that's totally different. But if you go in knowing that actually you've asked for less than you need, and knowing that you're going to go for a second one, then it's dishonest. I mean, there's no other to it. It's dishonest. You're lying to your community. You're saying you're going to do one thing, knowing that you can't do it. I'm not saying that Tim Schafer was dishonest at all. No. Tim Schafer is a great designer and a great developer, and Double Fine are doubly fine. So no criticism of Tim at all. But what I would criticise is that he should have known what that message was going to be. Because the one thing, I mean, I'll give you an example that we had, and that was that we promised that the game would be DRM free. And we've worked with Koch, who are fantastic. They're a great partner. And they were producing the retail version, and because they were responsible for that, they decided that it was going to have a Steam. And it was quite clear on the packaging, this requires a Steam account. And they went into production of that, and then they were also producing our Kickstarter rewards, which was great. And they needed the master, and they said, we've got to have the master, we've got to have the master. And we were just up to our ears. And I made a decision there and then, clearly the wrong decision. I said, just go with the production version, which required a Steam key. And so when they went out, of course 95% of people were very happy because they play it on Steam. But the people who wanted DRM went absolutely ballistic. What the do you think we are? Am I allowed to swear? And they had every right. They had every right to be that cross because we'd promised one thing. So the one thing I could have done is gone straight back and defended it or whatever. But actually, the best thing is just leave it for a day, decide what you're going to do, talk to people, and then be absolutely decisive. So the next morning, I tweeted, I talked to a team, what are we going to do? And I said, we've got to resolve this. These guys are right. This is what we promised. So we agreed that we would spend a few €1,000 to press some DRM-free ones. So I said, I was on holiday at the time, and I talked to the team, and I said, look, we've got to do something. These guys are right. That we promised the DRM-free, and that's what we've got to deliver. And we agreed that it would cost a few €1,000, but we would press some DRM-free. And the next morning, I tweeted, I misjudged the strength of the feeling. Of course, we will be sending DRM-free versions to anybody who asks for them. And of course that totally neutralized and solved that particular problem. These guys were right. There weren't very many, probably only a few hundred, but they were right. We'd promised something, we hadn't delivered it. What Tim should have done is he should have been quite clear on what his strategy was, and he should have stated it. And the end result was, we're going to self-fund the second part. We've run out of money. 3.3 million isn't enough to write a full adventure game. And we're going to fund the rest. And that would have been the end of it. But he wasn't clear on his message. Yeah. And that was the mistake. It was about three months. So it was about, ideally it would have been 2 months. But 3 months was just acceptable. Just acceptable. But I'll tell you what, I was also remembering the chaos, because there was a lovely journalist who actually came to York to cover it, a guy called Christian Neeb, and he brought a very nice cameraman, Tobias, I don't know his surname, and they asked to be in our offices when we launched, and I had dinner with Christian last night, and I was remembering the absolute mayhem of the launch, because for the first part we'd already promised it was going to be out. We really could not screw it up. We couldn't screw it up, and there was so much anticipation from our wonderful community, and we started uploading it, and we realized that we were going to be half an hour late, and I just wasn't sure what to do. Do we put out a message? And then we realized that the time was European time. It wasn't British time. So we had an extra hour, and it was going to be fine. So we couldn't believe how lucky we were. So the game went up, and we made it live. 20 minutes later, vast numbers of people saying, it's corrupt. The file is corrupt. And for some reason, Steam, whatever it was, I don't know why, it had gone corrupt. So this amazing euphoria of launching it suddenly went down. Thankfully, we only needed to replace a small file, and we still don't quite know why it corrupted. It was something to do with an interface that had gone wrong at that particular moment. So we uploaded the new file, and everything went into a roller coaster as well. And we'd worked so hard. I mean, the music guy, a guy called Simon, I'd had him up till 4 o'clock the morning of the launch, because I wasn't happy with elements of the music. I wasn't happy. And I said, Simon, I'm really sorry, but you need to be in at 8 tomorrow morning, because I'm still not happy with it. So he arrived at 8, and we worked on the music, and the cut-off point was 12. Okay? So the cut-off point was 12, because at that point we had a group of people who just had to test the game, because, the worst thing would be... And the game was very clean. There were very few bugs. And that's why we absolutely went to the wire, because I wanted to get in as much. And everybody said, well, you can always add it later. Well, no, because your first impression is where the vast majority of people are going to see it for the first time. And if you screw that up, you've kind of ruined it. And I'm sort of old school. My view is, if you buy a game, it kind of should be finished. It should be finished. So with the Xbox version and the PlayStation 4 version, obviously a lot of people patch on the first day. I didn't want to patch on the first day. I think if you buy something, it kind of should work. And I think that's good manners. So, and I know I'm old, so, maybe that's an old-fashioned view. We started with direct control. But in truth, direct control, and it doesn't work very well on Monkey Island. Of course, we looked at Monkey Island, where they have both a point-and-click interface and direct control. And direct control doesn't really work very well. So we tried both, and actually came to the conclusion that by putting a cursor on the screen, which kind of helps you as you go over things, it slows down, so it's easy to find things. it actually just worked better. So after quite a lot of experimentation, we decided that we were going to effectively use the cursor control on the left thumbstick and then put in context-sensitive instructions. And the response that we've had is that this just works really well. And one of the things that we were able to do was, with the benefit of a bit of time, is add some animations, whether they be just simple things like birds flying across the sky, people walking, pigeons, just things that we just didn't have time to do first time around. So, initially this is going to be exclusive to the console versions. Something else that people said is that it would be great to keep track of the characters. So we've added a character gallery. As you get to meet characters, they appear here. So you can see them, read about them, and this is we got feedback that people didn't really read the diaries. There was too much work to go back and read a diary, whereas people would go and read this sort of background and get a remember. So if they come back a week later, they'll just look back at the characters they've met, and it'll remind them of what they're meant to be doing. So there are quite a few new features that we've added, a few more sound effects. It's still basically the same game. Tweaked a few of the puzzles which we felt could have been improved. And added a few more sound effects, but primarily it's the same game brought across and just enhanced slightly. At some point we will, yeah. I mean, it's exclusive for the console for the time being, yeah. We almost certainly will do. I don't know when, but we will do. I mean, the other thing is that there were a few games, probably if you played the game from beginning to end on PC, it would have crashed maybe once or twice. So, an acceptable number of times. But my team are they're very experienced, and again, we just didn't think that we should allow any bug that we knew about, we were determined to fix. So even things that happened once every 100 times, we went on and on and on. And this version is actually really, really clean now. And of course, all of those changes will be put back onto the PC version. Not that the PC version was bugged in the first place at all. I think it was absolutely acceptable. But now we have a version that's ultra, ultra clean, which is great. We allow people to use the touchpad as well. And then the 4 buttons as well. So it actually works really well. So we give people the choice. And yeah, so I mean, it's great. It's great to be able to use the functionality as well. We were going to put the buttons effectively for double tapping. So you can single tap, which is the equivalent of the X or the left mouse button. But if you want to do more complex things like look at things, then you need to. So basically, I'd advise people to use the touchpad and the buttons. Oh, the other thing is, so on the PlayStation, and this is really fun. Back. So you can't hear it through here, but you've got the sound's coming from here.
I realized a few days ago that this controller has this ability.
Yeah, so that's really funny. So basically, you've got the ringing tone coming through the controller, and then Mr. Rickenbacker's voice, and anybody you talk to comes through the controller. So again, it's just great to be able to use the functionality of the controller in a really fun way. I do have a next project, but honestly, it's so early. It might not be even a game that we work on. I mean, we're doing code jams to just test various principles. It would be crazy. I mean, a dear developer friend of mine who's just been pulled over because he's promised things that then don't get delivered. We're all very wary to talk too early about things. So yes, of course there are new projects. I have lovely ideas for a Broken Sword 6, but that's probably not going to be our next project. Probably the project afterwards. It's just great. I mean, being independent now, being able to work directly with our community, gives us the choice to decide what we want to do, asking the community, rather than having to rely on a publisher to greenlight things, which kind of never really worked for adventure developers or independent developers. Well, we will definitely ask the advice of our community. Whether we go through Kickstarter, I don't know at all. There could be beta, early access, some sort of crowdfunding, yes, because we're not a rich company. We would need some sort of contribution, some sort of support from our community. Whether it's Kickstarter or something else, I don't know. It's a narrative game. Okay. It's a narrative game, and so it is an adventure game, but it's not a point-and-click adventure game. But it might never see the light of day. It might never happen. But the game that I'm working on at the moment is an adventure game, but not a point-and-click adventure game. So it's very, very story-based, with elements of emergent narrative. If the next game takes us a year and a half, then that takes us to the end of 2016. And I would love to be into some sort of production in 2016. So let's say 2017. I don't know. Let's say 2017. Although that's going to come back and haunt me, isn't it?